Good morning, Tubaneros. When you use the phrase eminent domain in the US and A, the image is conjured of government seizing the property of an individual citizen, his home or small business, in the name of the public good, to build a new highway, or, as in the case of the recent Mississippi Valley floods, to open levees to divert floodwaters to lesser populated areas to save damage to populated centers, sacrificing the homes and farms and businesses of some for the greater good. Well, you can bet there are plenty of libertarian think tanks who have railed against this form of state expropriation as totalitarian property seizure, that if all were left to private sources, there would be no need of such mandated forfeiture. The market would regulate everything in terms of fair market value, and no one's property would be seized for a pittance. No one's feelings hurt, everyone happy. No need for such draconian ruthlessness. Well, the fact is that eminent domain in the U.S. is largely used in a conniving way by state and local government in hand with private, corporate, commercial interests to take property from one, normally a small business, a homeowner, a farmer, someone small and weak and unimportant, with little clout or resources to resist, and give that property to someone else, usually a big box retailer at the city limits, a drugstore chain seeking a corner location, a real estate promoter trying to redevelop an older urban area by some exclusive gated residential area or casino or other entertainment shopping complex. In other words, public power is being used to ruin one citizen for the private gain of another. Because remember, that faceless paper entity known as a corporation has the same legal right as a living, breathing human being, and factoring in money as an expression of its rights, it actually has more of both at your expense. You can bet your last dollar that few corporate-funded free market libertarian groups of so-called concerned citizens are shaking fists at the state for this. Why? Why no outrage over this abuse of state power to crush the individual citizen and his property? First, it's being done by state and local governments under state and local eminent domain laws, not the federal government. When the federal state does something, that's big brother tyranny. When a state or local government agency or bureau does the same, it's furthering community development, by which is meant putting profit in the right pockets all the way around, as state and local government have always been much more corruptible to saying things the way the big retailer and developer want them to. There is little or no oversight of such practices at lower levels, whereas at the upper levels of state there is oversight, regulation, etc., all proof of big government tyranny and why local power is the best guarantor of liberty, in this case, the freedom to take from one to give to another. Secondly, big business may have big bucks, but why spend money when you don't have to? How do you think big business got big? It can't afford to deal with every little homeowner, businessman, neighborhood association and their litigators, or pay them the full value of their properties. The state, as usual, is a necessary tool for the process of the free market to function, for those with the most power in the market. There is not, nor can there be, any democratic equity between Walmart and Farmer Jones before a county zoning board. Therefore, his farm, or that older neighborhood, or that corner grocery, must be condemned under a very free interpretation of blight laws, condemned and seized and given for a nominal sum to another party for public improvement, this improvement not being a school, a thoroughfare, or something that would benefit the public good at large, but instead profit a very few large corporate investors. It's the equivalent of Don Corleone coming to your house to put a gun on your kitchen table, making you the offer you can't refuse. But Azov, look at the tax revenue these businesses will generate. Surely that operates for public benefit, so it's still win-win for everyone. Well, you say that only if you've never heard of tax incremental financing. And what's TIF? It's a policy that allows the big private project to recoup its construction costs by retaining a portion, or even all, of the tax revenue it collects at the register. That's right. The sales tax you pay at Walmart very often goes entirely back into the store to pay its bills, like the public power grids, water and police and fire protection. In other words, you're paying for their use of public services, straining those services further, and keep in mind that these developers often get tax abatements for several years, even decades, to begin with. So why do they even need tax incremental financing? Well, surely this abuse can be stopped dead in its tracks, because after all, the U.S. Constitution specifically states in the Fifth Amendment, the Basic Bill of Rights, that private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. So, with eminent domain laws being misused, it's a simple matter of taking offenders to federal court. Well, not so fast, Ex-Lax. The U.S. Supreme Court in 1954 changed the requirement of public use to public purpose. The difference is more than of words. It redefines the kind of activity from one of general public utility to any service offered to the public, even if that service is a private one. Notice this happened at the very time of the post-war real estate boom, with the rise of the planned suburbs, shopping malls, as well as the interstate highway, and the big retail establishments greedy for land off the right-of-ways. With the continued privatization of public interest, you can bet this will only continue at an even more abusive rate. This has opened the door to the biggest land grabbing since the building of the railroad system. Notice also that this was enacted in the same year as Brown versus Topeka, ending legal segregation in the U.S., which is heralded as proof of the system's inherent fairness to all. Yet I'll bet this is the first time you heard of the reinterpretation of public use doctrine by those same justices. Why is that? So, what can you do if you're threatened by a, let's say, well-funded local city council or county board out to make you an offer you can't refuse? There is no recourse? Well, not quite. While I've mentioned that most of the publicly heralded libertarian groups, the Cato Institute and so forth, really don't take much of a stand on this, there are groups like the Castle Coalition that is fighting eminent domain use in the court system. I have here its web address. Go to this site and you can learn about a creeping totalitarian trend, masterminded at the state and local level, and what recourse it has managed to create through citizens' action groups to combat it as far as is possible. And though the Castle Coalition is far from socialist, it does strive to protect the common citizen from the united abuse of big private power and his alleged public officials. Some cases are won, others are lost, as in the notorious New London, Connecticut showdown. And I can think of a local case where a Baptist church had its corner property, where it had been located for 50 years, condemned by the city council, the church torn down and a well-known drugstore outlet built on that corner in its place, though at least the church cemetery was left untouched. But, just across the road, an old family cemetery, including the grave of a Civil War soldier, was excavated so a strip mall developer could put up a U.S. Army recruiting station. So new men and women in uniform can defend the freedom of that soldier to have his final resting place pulled out from under him in the name of the free market. Uh-oh, a phone can knock. Well, who is it today? Hello? Who? Nicolae Ceausescu. What's up, old comrade? You and the Somozas taking a family cruise together on the Lake of Fire, eh? Why are you so hot? You're not still mad at the Romanian working class for betraying you after 20 years. Oh, you don't give a zomgits about that anymore, huh? But you're mad that U.S. capitalists are stealing your idea of using state power to gut old city quarters and tearing down the property of the little people to build huge projects for private use at state expense? That if you or the Somozas got shot and dumped in an alley for this, why isn't it happening to the likes of, say, whoop, I can't mention that name on YouTube. I'll get my plug pulled for sure. Well, look. For one thing, we have the rule of law here, Comrade Nicolae. Our dictators are too smart to put their faces up on public buildings for people to throw shit at. They know it's safer to stay private persons. That's why we have courts and elected officials. No wonder you clowns ended up in the dumpster of history.